Welcome back to Monday Musings, a casual conversation about culture and theology. I'm Justin Ely.
And I'm Daniel Chen. We're just a couple guys talking about some stuff.
The stuff that we've been talking about is a series that we have called Counter-Catechesis. We are using Tim Keller's book on preaching, communicating faith in an age of skepticism, to talk about how to receive the narratives that come our way all the time in the society that we live in and flip them and kind of digest them and process them through the gospel and then offer an alternative both to ourselves and the people around us in a gospel-informed way. So we hope it's been helpful. This will be the last one in the series.
Yeah, I hope it's been helpful for you. I know it's been helpful for me. And yeah, this is learn to read the culture and to speak the gospel into the culture, maybe one of the most important things we do.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're going to talk about the science and history narrative. But before we do that, we have our listener of the month.
Yeah, so our listener of the month is Caroline Mitchell. So congratulations, Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline.
And amongst other reasons, let me tell you why she is our listener of the month. She didn't hear about our podcast from a friend. She didn't hear our podcast from a church. She typed in theology into the Apple podcast store, and it came up and started listening. And I was like, I can't believe it. In some sense, we've kind of made it.
We've made it.
You know, someone actually searched, into the interwebs and found us and had nothing to do with us.
Man, it's time to monetize this puppy.
And yeah, this podcast is brought to you by Lifeway.
That brings us to our sponsor for today's podcast. After she said that, I also looked for us, and I searched culture and theology, and we were 10th.
Wow.
We were in front of Duke Divinity School's podcast.
Who were we behind?
I don't remember, but they seemed important enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like Al Mohler.
Right. Yeah. We were 10 and Al Mohler was 11. Gotcha, Al. No, I don't know where he was in the list. But yeah, I think The Briefing has quite a few listeners. So maybe a couple dozen more than ours.
Yes, yeah. But maybe just a couple.
A couple dozen.
Yeah.
And those are just the Southern Seminary students that have to subscribe to it to get a good grade,
Right.
Lest we're now going to be sued for libel and slander to Al Mohler. It was just a joke, Al.
Yeah.
So thank you, Caroline, for listening. We're grateful for you as a listener.
Yeah, we're grateful for all our listeners as well. And once again, if you guys have gotten anything out of our podcast, we'd love for you to leave a like or a comment or a review on our podcast.
But only if it's 5 stars.
But yes, exactly.
We've received 5-star and above podcast.
But mainly
reviews.
Share it with a friend. Not just so we can grow, but we do this because we want to help people think about these things in a gospel-centered way. Yeah. And it's helped you do that, and you think it could help someone else, help people think in a more gospel-centered way. We love to do that.
Absolutely. And we'd love to move from number 10 to number 9.
Yeah, so, sure. Yeah. You can help us do
Single
that.
digits. Yeah.
And you can become the listener of the month if you do that.
If you push us over the edge into the single digits, All right, so today we're going to talk about the final kind of narrative that Tim Keller covers in his preaching book. It's the chapter Preaching in the Late Modern Mind. And that's what we will call the science and history narrative. He calls it the history and rationality narratives. And it's the idea that science is a secular hope. So kind of underneath this narrative is this concept that science and technology will bring us a better future, And it's also kind of this obsession with being we want to be on the right side of history.
Yep. Which I'm sure you've heard that term in the past 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. We finally kind of arrived. This is the best it's been, history is kind of progressing toward this
the pinnacle of everything, this utopia.
Yeah. Yeah. And Keller points out that this narrative might be fading. This may have been more of a 20th century kind of narrative, but you think of all the dystopian movies out there. Right. And then you think of the fear that robots are going to take over and kill us all. That's kind of like in the whole like AI conversation, and like now it's almost like we're starting to be a little afraid of technology. Like it's no longer the Jetsons where like everything's just going to make our lives easier.
Right.
It's like maybe the robots take over and kill us. So it could be that this narrative is fading. But there does seem to be
maybe on the science side.
There's definitely still, you mentioned it last week, what C.S. Lewis called chronological snobbery.
Right.
That is definitely still going on. We think we finally arrived.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the narrative is that the thing is technology is going to get better whether people are scared of it or not. Like people will continue to innovate and create new things. And so whether people put their hope in it or not won't stop that fact that it will keep progressing forward. And that's why I think this narrative still is always going to be relevant.
Sure.
Because there will always be at least a subsection of people who will always believe in the technology side of it. But I think where this is actually morphed into in current day is there are increasing amount of younger folks. I know we're kind of in the younger folk range, but even younger than us, that kind of subscribe to a more Marxist, communist, like socialist viewpoint. And I actually think it does come from this, right? That there is a utopia out there that can be reached.
Yeah.
Now, maybe
if we just change A, B, and C, we can get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe, but the difference between the Marxist view and then a technology view is the technology view says if we can innovate and progress forward with knowledge and all this stuff, whereas the Marxist view is more about tearing down.
Yeah.
The utopia is behind, there's all these things in our current system that keep us from reaching this utopia. There's no answer to how to get to that utopia except for tear down the current system.
Right.
And so it's funny because I think the better future utopia, that narrative is still very much alive, but it is starting to shift from building forward to tearing down.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Keller points out that the gospel, Christianity, really teaches us that we've been too optimistic about history and about human nature. New is not always better. And he points out that the Nazis, for example, were sure that they were on the, quote, right side of history. And they clearly were not. So he says Christianity is far more pessimistic about the human race than these like current narratives are. Jesus had to die for our sins.
Yeah.
Like the human race was so bad that like a self-help program, a development program wasn't enough. It required the death of the Son of God.
Yeah.
Like that's how bad we are.
Yeah.
But Christianity is far more optimistic about the future of the material world, that the Bible ends with, a physical, restored, perfect world. The New Jerusalem comes down from heaven. So it's a much shinier picture than even the best utopian picture on this earth can provide.
Yeah, it is interesting because, we've talked about on this podcast before when you take out sin from like your worldview, that you just assume people will head towards good.
Right.
But the problem is because we are sinful, your view of that good is less good than it could be.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
So like our sin keeps us, like the way I see this is someone who's not perfect cannot actually imagine perfection because our view of perfection is imperfect.
Yep.
Because we're imperfect.
Yep.
Right. And so it's this interesting thing that when you take out sin, which people in our culture really have, you just assume that people are good, and then if you just create the right system,
right,
good will come.
Yep.
But that system that we can imagine that is good is still just like a dark shadow of what true perfection, true heaven, New Jerusalem could be.
Yeah.
And because our minds are so, bent by sin.
Yep.
We can't even, what we can imagine as great is really not that great to what God can imagine as great.
Yeah, that's
very interesting point.
Yeah. And kind of related to that, Keller points out that we, as Christian evangelists and preachers, we should show the complexity of evil. So he points to the biblical concept of the world, the flesh, and the devil, right? So the world, it shows that there is like corporate and systemic evil in this world. Like that's a real thing. That's a Christian thing, and we need to understand that. I would say, kind of most like modern people, that's all they got.
Yes.
Right? Is this systemic evil in the world. So in their minds, we can bring about utopia if the right science or the right whatever can deal with that.
Right.
But then you also have the flesh and the devil. So the flesh is the internal evil. Like
Right.
It's not just the system that's evil, it's you that are evil.
Because in our, it's so funny how this is all played out. We are such an individualistic society. Mm-hmm. Yet the only person who's not evil is you, like me.
Right.
Evil's always out there.
That's yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's always
It's
out
like-
there. It's never in here.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to the Billy Graham quote I often go to, the heart of the human problem is the problem of the human heart. And so that internal evil, if you create, and we talked about this, in which form of government is best.
Right.
You can create this hypothetical best form of government ever. Okay, and all the systems are good, and let's say we can start over from scratch, and any kind of systemic whatever evil in the society, you found a way to start fresh, start over. We're all good. You haven't erased the internal evil of the human heart.
Yes.
And so the same problems are going to eventually creep into the system.
Yeah. They might look different on the surface, but
Yep.
but it's all rooted in the same things.
Yep. And then the last one, everyone in the West ignores, but everyone else all around the world believes in, which is the devil. The
Right.
supernatural evil.
Yeah.
Like there actually is an enemy to our souls prowling around, trying to destroy us.
Right.
I saw one guy tweeted last week. He said, if you could see demons, you would pray more. And someone else replied to the tweet, "Thanks for tweeting this right before I went to bed." But we kind of, especially in the West, we ignore the supernatural.
Yeah.
But that is a factor in the evil and suffering that we experience in this world. So we really should show the complexity of evil. It is the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Yeah.
It's not quite as simple as just fix the system.
Yeah.
Although that's a good thing to do,
Yeah.
if you can and if it's broken.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. This is interesting in showing how technology and psychology can never erode these things, and kind of what you're saying, that because the sin starts from us personally in our hearts.
Yeah.
Think about it. Think about which government system throughout history there was no evil in.
Right.
It's silly. All of them.
The Garden of Eden in Genesis 1 and 2,
Right.
where there were two people around, roaming around naked.
And even they messed up.
Even they couldn't keep it together.
But even the technology, it's funny. Technology doesn't eliminate evil. It actually helps evil do more evil quicker.
Think about like the pornography industry.
Yeah.
So compare the pornography industry pre-internet was a dirty magazine that you get at the gas station.
Yeah.
To what it is today, the proliferation of that
Yeah.
is technology.
Yeah, I think too, like in terms of wars, we look back at people 5,000 years ago and think they're savages compared to us. But here's my point. We have nukes. You take the atomic bomb. One person can make one decision that will kill more people. Think about how long it would take one quote unquote savage from 5,000 years ago to kill as many people as the atomic bomb did in like 30 seconds.
Yep.
That's what technology can perpetrate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't, technology can make people's lives better. Like, I do want to acknowledge that, you know, medicine can help us live longer, can heal pain, you know, technologies can help. And, you know, I love watching Netflix with the internet, you know.
Praise God.
Praise God. Or, you know, like Christian flicks. I don't know what you're watching. I forgot the Christian. Pure flicks, yeah. Technology can do good, but at the same time, because it comes from within us, right? We are we believe we're totally depraved, that sin has infected everything, but we're not utterly depraved. We can always get worse, right?
Right.
Which means not everything is like purely 100% evil.
Yeah.
Right? So that means when we create technologies, that's how it's going to come out.
Yep.
Some of the technology is going to do some good, and it can also perpetrate evil more.
Right.
Yeah, it can make the good gooder and the evil eviler.
Yes.
You know? So.
Very good grammar.
Yeah.
It like as an example, last Christmas, Hillary and I gave ourselves a robot vacuum.
Hey, congratulations.
It has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. And just the pleasure of, we finished dinner and we got 3 little kids, so the chances of stuff on the floor is 110%.
Right.
And I'm like, we're going to go up for a bath, and I'm going to open my phone and press this button, and I'm going to have a robot vacuum come and take care of all
Yes. What's your robot's name?
We haven't named him or her.
Oh.
What's your robot's name?
Well, we have 2, and one is Cheryl McLean, and the other one is Betty McSweeps. So...
Very creative names.
Yeah, that's their names.
Wow, I
think Cheryl is the one we currently use.
Oh.
Betty's been retired.
Yeah, Betty. Is she retired or has she died?
No, she retired. We retired her,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
We got an upgraded model.
Yeah, well, I hate it when that happens. But that has legitimately made my life better. Because I'm actually able to spend more time with my kids because of that technology.
Yeah.
Because we aren't clean. Right. So there great blessings to that, but example of atomic bomb or pornography, great evil can grasp onto the evil of the human heart can grasp onto new technology and use it for evil means. Yeah. So it's not a straight line progress.
Right.
Keller also points out that we should also talk about wisdom as Christians, and very much kind of taking the cue from Proverbs, and that wisdom is not the same thing as knowledge. So we might be increasing in knowledge as a society, that's true. That doesn't necessarily mean we're increasing in wisdom.
Yeah.
And so we should encourage people to pursue wisdom.
And I'll give you a great example from our AI podcast, right? Mm-hmm. Is or just the internet, right? We have access to every single piece of basically information from the history of the world until now, right? But that's knowledge. But wisdom is to try to figure out which of it is actually true.
Yeah, and what do I do with this?
Yeah, and what do I do with it?
Yeah.
So one is you're going to have a lot of stuff out there that is historical and true, and you're going to have a lot of trolls out there pushing. I mean, just think about Twitter.
Yep.
It's like you take one event and you have 1,000 tweets. Some of them are going to be the actual event, what happened. You're also going to have some people who get it wrong, and then you're going to have some people who are just trolls trying to make up something to make it seem like something it wasn't, right?
Yep.
Well, wisdom is trying to figure out which one is actually true. And then the other part of wisdom is, well, what do I do with this information now that I have it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So kind of summarizing just the steps that we go through, right? Recognize, affirm, subvert, and fulfill. So recognizing this narrative is that, we all do want a better future. And we would like our kids' lives to be better than our lives, and the society that our kids grow up in to be better than the society that we grow up in. So that's kind of part of the base level of this narrative, is we do want things to get better. And we can affirm, step 2, that a lot of science and technology has made our world better.
Yeah.
Small example being the robot vacuum. Like there are
Yeah.
things that, I just think, you go back to our grandparents, great grandparents, and in their like grandparents' early years, definitely great grandparents, you're talking about like you have an outhouse
Yeah.
outside. That you're going to the bathroom outside.
Yeah.
Your ability to travel is way limited.
Yeah.
There are just some like really great things about living in the modern world that
Basically every single one of our life hacks are like how technology has made our lives better.
Yeah. You really like you had me at indoor plumbing, like you just think about, man, that like how would your life be different if you didn't have a toilet in your house
Yeah.
or a shower?
Yeah.
So we thank God for technology.
Yeah, for sure.
Or AC.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot we can affirm in that. But step 3, subvert. It can't deal with the full range of evil and human suffering.
Yeah.
We talk about the world, the flesh, and the devil. And oftentimes technology is used by the flesh to perpetrate evil.
Yeah.
On a sometimes more massive scale than it would have been without it.
It goes back to the problem isn't out there, it's in here.
Yeah.
In our hearts.
Right.
And the thing is, if the problem was always only out there, technology could potentially solve it.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because technology is out there.
Yes.
But I've said for years, like, technology changes, but sin doesn't. Mm-hmm. The same sins that we struggle with now as a society are the same sins 2,000 years ago.
Yes.
4,000 years ago. Same
Yes.
sins. It's just we do it differently now
Correct.
because the technology has changed, or we have more knowledge or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I feel like the subverting is really just, it comes down to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the problem of humans isn't out there, it's in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the last step, fulfill. Only through the cross does God eliminate suffering and evil without eliminating the sources of suffering and evil, which is us. And that's an important thing. And again, I learned this.
Talk about grace.
Yeah, I learned this from Tim Keller in another book. But whenever we say, I just can't believe in a God that would allow suffering like this. Well, he's allowing you to live. You
Right.
know? And we somehow think that like we are somehow like disconnected to the suffering in the world.
Right.
But when you think about it, even like the like smallest amounts of suffering, like when you were a little kid, you probably made fun of another little kid. Like
I definitely did.
Yeah.
I still do.
You make fun of little kids?
No, that particular little kid, still, yeah.
Darn you, Johnny. So you brought suffering into that person's life, and then you can think of that. You can ramp up that on massive scale,
Yeah.
whether you commit fraud and defraud someone, or adultery, or we do these things to each other that bring suffering into other people's lives, and other people do it to us. And that's the sinfulness and depravity of humanity. So if we said, why can't God eliminate suffering? Well, that would involve eliminating us too. It would involve wiping everyone out, because we aren't just the victims of suffering, we're the perpetrators of it.
Even to the fact that, it's funny, I saw this, on Instagram, I follow this. I don't follow. Instagram has told me to watch this Korean family that eats a lot of food together. And
I wonder why they would think that you would be interested in that.
And I love it. I love watching it because I love food, But there was this one lady that was like, I love your channel, but I just feel like you are overindulging when there's other like starving kids in Africa and stuff. And she got wrecked, and they were like, oh, have you moved to Africa and sold all you have to feed them? And I was like, that's actually a good point, because when we complain about suffering, It's like, what have you done to
Right.
alleviate it?
Right.
Why would God allow suffering in the world? I'm like, okay, well, why have you allowed it?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Why have you done it? And then why have you allowed it?
Yeah.
And it's because some of it is, people are like, well, it's not practical for me to go sell all I have and go move to Africa. And I'm like, I get that,
Sure.
Like, that's where most people land. There are some people that have sold all they have and moved to Africa to help starving children. But it is funny when people, it comes back to like, it's just easier to point at God and to blame him for the suffering than to look at ourselves and to say, I'm part of the
problem.
I'm part of this machine that's causing the suffering.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that is the good news of the gospel, is that God has promised a new world without any suffering, which means it has to be a world without sin. And before we get to that new world, he's given a way for you to have your sin taken care of through the cross.
Yeah.
And so only in the gospel does God eliminate the root causes of suffering, which is sin, and then promise a full and renewed and restored world, which we've pointed out, if you don't deal with sin and you take the kind of Marxist view and you rip down the current rulers of the current ruling class and the current system and structure, and you replace it with something else, the same thing's just going to happen in a different way, from a different angle, different perspective. Because you haven't dealt with sin. You haven't dealt with the human heart.
You look at just the Chinese and Russian communist revolutions where they did that.
Sure.
Where they tore down the system.
Yep.
They killed 100 million people between the two countries in like 10 years.
Yep.
Think about that.
Yeah. Just mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. Yeah.
So that's the science and history narrative. So that brings us to the close of our series. Any final thoughts on this narrative or counter-catechesis in general?
Yeah, this is something that in terms of personal development that I feel like we always tell people is always be a student, always be learning.
Yeah.
The thing is, culture does change, which means in 10 years we may have to redo this podcast because we got to learn what the new cultural narratives are.
We'll just have AI do it for us.
Yeah, Chat GPT will probably just do it for us. But I think that's the thing is like, never stop learning. Never stop learning about the goodness of God through his scriptures and how to worship him better, and never stop learning about our culture, the things around us, especially you as parents. Yeah. Instead of assuming our kids are going to grow up in the same culture we did, learn their culture so you know how to speak to your kids and speak into it, right? And so always be learning, both on the biblical side and always be learning on the cultural side too, so that we can speak truth of the Bible in the language that the people are speaking now.
Yeah, that's good. I'd say, start with yourself. Like, do this with yourself. Do counter-catechesis with yourself, because you're probably more influenced by the culture than you think you are.
Oh, absolutely.
And then if you're a parent, especially of young kids, bring this into your home. And, you don't have to be annoying about it, but when you watch a movie, be looking for these narratives, and have a conversation about it after the movie's over, after the show's over. If you kind of saw a thread where this movie's going toward a particular narrative, practice the recognize, affirm, subvert, fulfill, because I think it's important when we're thinking of discipling our kids. If your kids are very much in church, in this culture, very much would mean like Sunday morning and one other night of the week. So a very involved church person at this stage in our culture is like, you go every Sunday morning and you go on Wednesday night for a Bible study or a kids program or whatever. Well, that's great. That's 2 hours a week,
Yeah.
That's not enough to undo the narratives that are coming the way of your kids. And it also doesn't mean that you can you can have your kids in 20 hours of Bible study a week. That's not realistic. Like, that's not going to happen. But I think if you employ this kind of counter-catechesis on a regular basis, and you're kind of on the lookout for cultural narratives, and you want to help your kids process that, I think it could be a great gift to them.
Do it at the dinner table. Do it before your kids go to bed, during your bedtime routine. I think we should, before bedtime, we have a short time of, like, essentially it's family worship. Do it at that time.
We do too, yeah. And we tell them, just remember the spiritual reality and visualize the demons in your womb right now. Night-night.
Instead of, we always talk about how, like, vision leaks, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're like buckets with holes at the bottom, and slowly the vision leaks out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually better, instead of talking about this all at once with your kid and give them a flood of information and then just say, I did it.
Drip, drip.
Next thing.
Dude, drip, drip, drip.
Yeah. You got to do the drip method. Just drip, 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 drip all the time.
Yep.
All you parents got to think every single day, what do you want your kids to learn? What kind of person do you want them to be? Mm-hmm. Drip that. Drip, 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 drip. Every day, all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's that Deuteronomy 6, while you're walking, when you go to sleep, when you rise, it's just kind of this picture of you're walking around, you're always looking for opportunities to instruct in the Lord.
Yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed this series through Counter-Catechesis. I feel like we've gotten a lot out of it, so it's been really interesting to kind of dive into the cultural narratives in a deeper sense. So thanks for joining us, and who knows what we'll be talking about next week. But we will talk to you then.